Hello, health, the horror of what's happening in Ukraine, and I promise a little bit of happiness too. Welcome to Caroline Ward. The politician will see you now with their prescription for our health service.
Good morning, Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister, part of the changing lineup on the morning sofa with his ideas.
Everyone on the NHS has done a superb job. They deserve enormous praise. Compared to where we were in the winter, we're making real progress.
So you're being clear.
Trying not to be distracted by the never-ending drama around his old boss.
Mr Johnson, will you be further embarrassed by your WhatsApp messages during lockdown?
But with pressure on staff, the state of some wards and strikes, Keir Starmer claimed the NHS won't survive another Tory government.
At the next election, the NHS is on the line.
Yet when it comes to the crunch, are Labour's plans really that different at all? So we have one big question this morning. Are our politicians really getting to grips with the NHS? We'll ask the man who should be able to tell us, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay. When will Russia start telling the truth about what is happening in Ukraine? With warnings of a new offensive, Russia's ambassador talks about escalation.
It's a big idealistic mistake to think that Ukraine may prevail, which Russia is 16 times bigger than Ukraine. We have enormous resources, and we hasn't just started yet to act very seriously.
And the man who says Labour can get the long-term sick back to work, Jonathan Ashworth, will be with us too. And with ITV in meltdown, we'll talk to the former Culture Secretary and now TV presenter herself, Nadine Dorries. And with me at the panel, one of Vladimir Putin's arch critics, Bill Browder. Vivek Trivedi, who will lead junior doctors out on strike from the British Medical Association. And as the Chancellor suggests a recession could be worth it to get inflation down, the boss of one of the country's leading business groups, Siobhan Haviland from the British Chambers of Commerce. Morning. I hope you've got some coffee on because there's a lot we want to talk to you about this morning. The NHS in a few minutes, but first let's look at the front pages. And the fallout from Philip Schofield admitting an affair with a younger colleague at This Morning is on the front page of the Mail on Sunday and The Sun on Sunday. Holly Willoughby saying she was lied to. BBC News is leading this morning on another night of drone attacks on the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. We'll talk about Ukraine later in the show. And The Independent has a story that I think might get tongues wagging, claiming Tory MPs have claimed they're driving fines on expenses. And The Telegraph has a story saying the Prime Minister has asked supermarkets to cap the basic food prices. Welcome to all of you this morning. Siobhan, let's go straight to that. A Conservative government trying to cap food prices. Would that work?
So, let's think about what businesses have faced over the last year and a half. We estimate probably about 20 to 25% input inflation with 10% output inflation. So they are absorbing a huge amount of costs into their bottom line. Supermarkets working on very, very tight margins. So it's not like anyone's taking, no one's profiteering. It's great to see them getting around the table with government to find new ways that we can help consumers. That's a good thing. Obviously, we'll wait to see the detail. We have to bear in mind that there are smaller retailers for whom this will be even harder from a margin point of view. So we have to keep them in mind too.
So small businesses actually might get squeezed out. If the big boys can afford to drop prices further, small businesses might be in real trouble.
Well, 80% of our economy is small and medium-sized enterprises. Slightly different in the retail sector, of course, which, has a lot more bigger businesses. But we just need to make sure they're all taken into account.
And it's interesting, so many things going on are really connected at the moment. So that inflation that Siobhan was talking about is in large part due to what's happening in Ukraine, that conflict there. It feels like a big moment is coming, potentially. Ukraine talking about escalation, Bill, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, here we are. There was going to be the spring offensive. It hasn't happened yet because they're waiting for the weapons to come in. The Ukrainians have been supplied with an enormous amount of tanks and artillery and so on. When it happens, I think it's going to be a big deal. I think that Russia really is going to be on the back foot, and that's what we're all kind of counting the moments for.
Well, a bit later in the programme we'll hear from the Russian ambassador on what's going on in their regime, and also about political prisoners that Vladimir Putin has locked up. I know you've been working hard on that too, but inflation, of course, is one of the things that's put such pressure on pay packets. Now, junior doctors are locked in a dispute with the government. What would you want to hear from Steve Barclay?
I would want to put forward to Mr. Barclay that, despite weeks of intensive negotiations, does he understand why the 5% pay uplift that was offered to doctors would frustrate doctors on a background of a more than 26% real terms pay cut over the last 15 years, which doesn't even account the most recent financial year? And what would he plan to do to address this undervaluing of NHS staff affecting morale? OK, well, we will put that to him, as well as some other subjects. All three of you, thank you very much for now. And we've already been hearing from you in the last couple of days about your experiences of the NHS. You do keep getting in touch with us. As ever, you can email kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk or use the hashtag #BBCLauraK. Or if you're one of those people who likes to look at two screens at the same time, you can follow our conversation on the BBC Live page. The address is there for you. And the NHS is always the subject of political battles and bust-ups. In the last week, we've had both the main parties claim they're the ones who will shake things up. Wes Streeting from Labour was pushing his plans last week, and the Health Secretary's in the red chair this morning. Welcome to you, Steve Barclay. Hi. First of all, let's have a look at this. We've got some pictures here. King's Lynn Hospital in Norfolk, where they're using things to prop up the roof. St Helier Hospital in Sutton, where they've got buckets with leaks coming down. We've heard about hundreds of sewage leaks into hospitals in England in the last few days. You've been in charge for 13 years. How have you let it get this bad?
Well, we announced on Thursday over 20 billion of investment into our new hospitals programme, including at places like King's Lynn, a full rebuild of those hospitals. That is what NHS leaders had asked us to do. It's the biggest ever investment into the NHS estate. So we are responding to the challenges of the RAC hospitals. They do need to be replaced by 2030. And that's exactly what we're doing. And we're committed to 40 new hospitals by 2030. That is the biggest capital investment the NHS will have seen. And we set out the details of that in the House on Thursday.
You have there repeated the claim that the government is building 40 new hospitals. Now, before we do anything else, I just want you to be completely straight with viewers. There are not 40 brand new hospitals being built, because that description includes new wings for some hospitals, refurbishments for others. It does include some new hospitals, but let's be completely honest, Steve Barclay. I'm sure you're a politician who likes people to think they can believe everything you say. You are not building 40 brand new hospitals, are you?
Well, it's in line with the announcement that was made in 2020.
That's
what the manifesto said was 40 new hospitals. That is what we committed to in the House on Thursday. Over £20 billion on the investment to do so. And you're right, places like King's Lynn, which are propped up, I've been to visit it, I've seen firsthand the challenges there. And it's a hugely positive message for NHS staff, for patients and for the wider population in areas like King's Lynn, Bury St Edmunds, Huntingdon, and the 7 areas where the RAC hospitals are being prioritised.
Before we move on, I really want you to be straight about this. Because for a normal person, building a new wing or maybe refurbishing part of a hospital, that is not a brand new hospital. If you save up and you get a new conservatory on the back of your house, you don't have a new house. So can you be honest with people? You're not building 40 brand new hospitals.
Well, some of the schemes include, for example, a hospital being gutted and fully refurbished. If I look at Charing Cross, for example, that's exactly what we'll be doing, and we'll be starting work to decant some of the facilities and then refurbish. So there's a range of things within the scheme.
So there's a range of things. That was a debate that was 40 new hospitals.
That was a debate that was had in 2020.
Yes, but
we're sticking with those schemes, but we're accelerating, exactly as you just pointed to, we're accelerating those schemes, which include 5 brand new hospitals, which were the additional RAC schemes that the NHS leaders said needed to be taken forward.
This is important, because do you believe in being really straight with our audience? You do. Right. So you've said there is a range of things, and you've just admitted there it's a range. So why keep repeating that you are building 40 brand new hospitals. You are not. That is spin with a capital S.
Well, if it's a new wing, a new facility, a women and children's hospital, for example, as part of a wider campus, that is something, as a patient, you go in. What matters to you as a patient is whether the facilities are state-of-the-art, whether they're new. If I look at Kings Lynn, that is a complete rebuild using the modern methods of construction, the Hospital 2.0 that we're going to use to accelerate this programme. The list of schemes is the schemes that were set out in 2020. That hasn't changed. We brought 5 additional hospitals into the programme, including the 2 that you just highlighted.
Because their roofs are falling down, not because you're doing them a favour.
Well, that's because they were built with a particular type of concrete. We've since had reports from independent assessors that have said there's growing concerns around the safety. We've put in place over £600 million of preventative measures, but we recognise there's a real urgency to those. So they will be completely rebuilt. That's been added to the programme, and that's why some schemes have become part of a rolling programme.
OK, so, but a rolling programme means for some communities, as you've just said, it's very important to people that they turn up somewhere and the facilities are good. A rolling programme means that some places have rolled off the bottom of the list. So some projects that won't be done by 2030, North Devon, East Sussex, Hampshire, Nottingham, Queen's Medical there, Lancaster and Preston, and let's take St Mary's in London. Huge, big, important hospital. They don't know now when the work's going to be done. And the boss has said if there's a big delay past 2030, it will be hugely damaging for the health and healthcare of hundreds of thousands of people. This is a story of really long delays at which patients are going to suffer. How can you justify it?
We need to differentiate between when schemes are starting and when they're completing. And you just challenged me in terms of honesty. If you look at 9 of the last 10 hospital builds in this country, they were over time and over budget. Why? Because quite frequently they were started and then specifications were changed and the schemes massively overran. We're being honest in saying that there will be difficulties on some of the schemes. There's often local factors that need to be worked through, land acquisitions, service redesign, various factors that need to be taken on board, constrained sites, which make it challenging to complete those by 2030. But what we will be doing in all of those schemes is starting work, getting the enabling works underway, progressing them as part of the new hospitals programme.
But when will a hospital like St Mary's actually see things fixed?
The key is that they will be starting work and we will make progress on enabling works. But what we're saying,
we all know when a builder turns up for the first time, that doesn't mean that you're going to get the project finished anytime soon.
What we have seen repeatedly with the NHS is schemes start and then take much longer to complete. So we are being honest that some schemes will take slightly longer than 2030, but we're going to get on with them. They're still part of the programme, they're still going to be funded, work on them will start, but we're also recognising the 2 that you picked out, where with the RAC hospitals, as they're known, there is an immediate issue. We've recognised that, we've brought those into the programme, and that's a hugely positive message for staff,
well, some
for patients
people might say it's not a positive
hospitals.
message, it's actually what you've got no choice about because the roofs are falling in. But anyway, we've talked in detail about that, and thank you for clarifying that it's a range of building, not 40 brand new hospitals. There's also a profound problem with delay in the NHS about caring for our elderly and the most vulnerable people in society. Now, we talked about it the last time you were here in November. You vowed to get that sorted, and at that point there were 13,500 people in hospital in England who could have been cared for at home if there was support available to them in the community. Now, we've checked the latest figures that are available. It's still at 12,500. So 6 months on, past the worst of the winter, you've barely made a dent in that. Why not?
Well, we've invested in it. We have announced the extra 250 million in January as part of our urgent emergency recovery programme. That number has come down from its peak, but it is challenging. We've seen more complex cases coming into hospital. There are challenges in terms of getting that discharge, which is so important to getting flow into our hospitals. That relieves the pressure on emergency departments. In turn, that relieves the pressure on ambulance handovers. So
when will we see the social care plan from the government?
Well, we made announcements in terms of staffing with the plan that we put out last month, an extra 250 million of investment in skills within care. There was more investment into social care at the autumn statement, up to 7.5 billion. One of the key things that the Chancellor prioritised in the autumn statement, along with the 6.6 billion
will we see the social
of funding.
care plan from and the
into the
Conservatives
NHS.
to reform the system as Boris Johnson
Well,
wanted to. Will we see that this side of the election?
I just touched on the fact that last month alone we put some additional investment into skills within the care sector, looking at the professional qualifications, how we improve retention. So we are working on that with local authorities. But you're right, discharge is a key challenge within hospitals. That's why we've got the urgent and emergency care recovery plan. We have seen ambulance handover delays come down. Response to Cat 2s are now below 30 minutes, which is marked progress from where they were in January. So the plan is working, but I recognise there is more to do.
There's still a big problem, and no confirmation then of when we'll see the social care plan, if it will be this side of the election. But you mentioned staffing there, which for a lot of people who understand the health service say it's absolutely fundamental to a lot of the problems that there are at the moment. Vivek Trivedi, the junior doctors leader, is here. We heard what he said a few minutes ago, really challenging you on how you are going to sort this out. Now, are you going to budge so that they call off their strikes?
Well, we have had a number of weeks of negotiations with the junior doctors, but what is striking is their refusal to move from their demand for a 35% pay rise. And in fact, in the course of the negotiations, it increased to 49% if you include 24-25. Now, in response to taking a constructive approach to the negotiations, the BMA themselves asked if we would bring in an intermediate figure, a very respected NHS leader, Cathy McLean. That's what we did. But notwithstanding her involvement and the talks that we have had, the offer we put on the table in line with the offer that the NHS Staff Council has received, recognising the value of junior doctors, they've refused to move from the 35%.
Okay.
And I don't think that is a fair and reasonable demand for them to take, but we want to engage with them. We have been doing, and it's the junior doctors that walked away from those negotiations by calling strikes.
Well, Vivek, the Health Secretary says the ball's in your court, you're being unreasonable.
I would say a 5% pay uplift this year would still amount to a massive real terms pay cut. It would only further the pay erosion that doctors have had to face over the last 15 years. And so an offer which does not reverse that trajectory would not be fair or reasonable, given that we've seen time and time again what impact erosion has on pay, on the erosion of pay has on doctors' morale and retention, and ultimately it's driving doctors away. So we need to do something to prevent this from
So he's pretty
furthering.
clear. You need to budge in order to stop this.
They haven't moved from 35%. That's the key. There needs, Laura, to be movement on all sides.
So you won't move if they do?
We have moved as a government from where we were with the pay review body recommendations to the offer we made. That offer is part of a wider discussion. There's a range of other things that the BMA have tabled alongside pay that they wish to discuss, and we're ready to engage with them. But the key point is that the BMA Junior Doctors Committee have refused to move from their demand for a 35% pay rise, and that has been the key issue that's caused
And we'll pick that up with Vivek in a few minutes' time. But there are other issues at root here, though, about working quality, the standard of the conditions that people have to work in. And as Vivek said, doctors are walking away. There are terrible shortages in the NHS. What are you doing about that? If you're locked in these disputes, you're still in dispute with the Royal College of Nursing, you're in dispute with the junior doctors, doesn't that also say something about your attitude towards the professions?
Well, we're investing more in our NHS. The Autumn Statement set that out. We're hugely valued. And I think everyone recognises the pressure that junior doctors have been under with the pandemic and the continuing pressures from an older population.
They want that recognised with more pay, as do the nurses.
And that is why we've increased the number of medical undergraduates. We increased that by 25%. We've got more people applying for medical courses now than ever before, and more for medical degrees compared to any other specialties. So we've got more people applying. We're increasing the number. We're opening up new routes, such as medical apprenticeships, and we want to engage on a wider package, not just on pay, but the other issues that we know are impacting on junior doctor
It's interesting you mention all of those plans for staffing. Will we finally see the workforce plan for the NHS next month?
Well, the government has said it's committed to a long-term workforce plan.
Yes, you said that since 2017. Is it coming next month or not?
Well, actually, in the Autumn Statement that the Chancellor set out, the commitment to bring forward the long-term workforce plan. We've said that we will do that shortly. A huge amount of work is going on within government on how we grow our domestic workforce, because we recognise that the medical profession has been under huge pressure with the pandemic, with the growing strains, not just here, but if you look across the UK. And we are making significant progress within England. If you look at our long-term waits, our 18-month waits, in England we got below 11,000 at the end of March. In Wales it was around 74,000. We almost eliminated our 2-year waits in the summer below 2,000. In Wales they were at 32,000. So in England we are making significant progress,
know that you said
but we need to
grow
for the workforce. We need to grow our domestic workforce, and the long-term plan will set that out.
We'll set that out shortly, I know that you said. Just as we come to an end, I want to ask you about something else. What's a Conservative government doing telling supermarkets to fix their prices? It's like price controls, isn't it?
That's not my understanding. My understanding is that the government is working constructively with supermarkets as to how we address the very real concerns around food inflation and the cost of living, and doing so in a way that is also very mindful to the impact on suppliers. Because I think we've got to be cited on the fact that many suppliers, often very small businesses, family-run businesses themselves, are under significant pressure from increased costs.
And have any of the supermarkets yet signed up to this idea of having price caps on basic items?
Well, my understanding based on the discussions last night is this is about having constructive discussions with supermarkets about how we work together, not about any element of compulsion. But it's also being very cited on the impact of suppliers and making sure we protect suppliers who themselves face considerable pressures.
OK, Steve Barclay, thank you very much indeed for coming in for our discussion with our viewers this morning. Thank you. Great to have you here. Now, you might remember in our very first programme in September, we went to speak to Olena Zelensky, the First Lady of Ukraine. And we are determined to follow what's going on with the conflict, which now seems to be moving into a different phase, more than a year in. Ukraine says it's about to start a new offensive, but there are signs too of discontent on the Russian side. One of President Putin's staunchest supporters, at least he was, is Yevgeny Prigozhin. He's the leader of the mercenary group Wagner that's been doing much of the fighting, particularly around Bakhmut. And he's blasted Russian ministers, accusing them of costing his men their lives. But he also said, we are in such a condition that we could lose Russia. So will Putin's regime acknowledge their difficulties, tell the truth about what is going on? I went to Billionaires Row in London to ask the Russian ambassador here, what did he make of that warning?
He is a free man, he is a free person, he is commenting on what is happening in Bakhmut or Artyomovsk, how the battle has gone. But actually, I don't think that he is very much wrong, because the threat that existed for us on the eve of the military operation or special military operation that has started in Ukraine was really the danger that very serious danger presented to the existence of our state.
There was no threat to you before the invasion of Ukraine. It's very well documented that the claims that Russia repeatedly circulated were false. Those are baseless claims. There was no widespread evidence of that.
You do not say the word false or lie or something like that, because this is not true. Ukraine has assembled an army which is 2.5 bigger than in Poland, although the population is comparable. So it was quite capable, a very capable army, which was, the target was Russia. And when we have heard about the nuclear weapon, possible acquisition of nuclear weapon by Ukraine, that was a real threat.
Ambassador, there is no concrete evidence that those claims are true. And I'm asking you this afternoon about what is happening in this conflict right now. Mr. Prigozhin, one of Putin's staunchest allies, suggested there is a risk of losing Russia because of what is happening right now. Do you disagree?
Not anymore. I do not support this statement, which probably is taken out of context. I'm not sure about, I haven't heard him saying this or commenting it that way. And I do believe that we have prevented already anything like that by action.
Let's talk about how the war has been conducted. There has been an attack on a hospital in Dnipro. Our colleagues at BBC Verify have checked. A missile has fallen onto the hospital. Civilians have died. A 6-year-old and a 3-year-old boy are among those who have been hurt. How can you justify an attack like that on civilians, on a hospital?
The problem is that the shooting is going on for 9 years. And every day shooting is going on Lugansk, Donetsk, and all of that. The day before yesterday, kindergarten was destroyed. The day before that, a bus with civilian persons was totally burned by American weapons. But nothing is in your press about that.
The United Nations, which is an organization of which Russia is a member, reported in March having taken extensive evidence that Russia had committed willful killings, rape, torture, the transfer and deportation of children. The world saw the attack on the theatre in Mariupol. The world saw the attack on the train station in Kramatorsk, the shopping mall in Kremenchuk, the maternity ward in Mariupol. Why won't you tell the truth about the crimes that are being committed in Ukraine by your country?
The world also should see what has happened during these 9 years of shooting. Jeffrey Sachs yesterday has made a very good comment. He has said that shooting has started not in February 2022. Shooting has started in 2014 with Maidan, that has been supported by UK, US, Germany, France, which has brought the anti-Russian government into this. And actually, since that time, shooting is going on in Donbass, when the Ukrainian army has sent its troops, and when they have built up fortresses, and since that time they are shooting and killing kids, children over there, demolishing houses, and I'm afraid that's the truth. During this shooting.
Ambassador, there is some limited evidence of some crimes being committed by Ukrainian troops during this conflict, but there is nothing that compares to the evidence, widespread evidence of war crimes being committed by Russia. I will ask you one more time, why will you not tell the truth about what the world can see?
This is easy, actually. We do documentation of every crime, what is happening. We're documenting every crime, what is happening
by
in
Russian
Donbass,
troops?
By Ukrainian troops.
What about your own troops' behaviour?
What do you want from me? No.
I'm asking you a question about what Russian troops are doing on the ground.
What's the purpose of your question?
My question is, why won't you tell the truth about what the world can see, what the United Nations has documented? War crimes being carried out by Russian troops in Ukraine.
United Nations cannot document anything because Secretariat is not empowered to make any investigation.
I'd like to ask you about how Russia is handling criticism of what is going on at home. Now, the UK government has condemned the politically motivated conviction of Vladimir Kara-Murza in a Moscow court. Now, we have spoken to his wife, Evgenia, and she has a question for you. I'd like to play it to you.
Ambassador Kelin, I have a question for you as a representative of the Russian state. Why does a government that claims to have the overwhelming support of the population need to use repression and prison terms of up to 15 years against anyone who opposes the official narrative?
Vladimir Kara-Murza, he is in possession of two citizenship. One is Russian and one is British. He has been treated by the Russian court as the Russian citizen, and his British citizenship is not included. I think that personally, I can say that he has done everything to be actually deserved what he has deserved now, because what he has really has been speaking about, it is not my judgment, it is judgment by the court. Yes, if you are interested in what is being said in Russia about events, what is going on, just turn on the television.
But there is no free press in Russia.
I haven't seen any of the
other journalists have been imprisoned.
I haven't seen any of the speaker that has been arrested or treated differently during this political or after political shows.
What about Evan Gershkovich from the Wall Street Journal? What is it about President Putin that rather than confronting his critics, he throws them in jail?
No, he was arrested because he was a spy, very easily. And it happens
completely denied by his newspaper, his employers and himself.
That can be done. But if you will talk to your colleague journalists who are more experienced, they will tell you that it happens very often.
What is the end game for Russia here? Do you want peace?
We want peace, but on certain conditions, of course. For us, two things are important: that there will be no threat from Ukraine to Russia. This is one thing, and which
there was no threat
very
to Russia
important.
from Ukraine at the beginning of all of this.
You would like to return to our beginning of the conversation?
No, I'm just reminding
Okay.
our viewers.
Then just let me continue. And second, that Russians in Ukraine will be treated like all other nations in the world, like French people are being treated in Belgium. So what has happened in Ukraine during all these years, it was extreme nationalism, extreme, absolutely, in its ugliest form, because Russian language has been prohibited, education in Russian language has been prohibited. It is Russians have been squeezed out of social life in this way.
Again, you were repeating those claims for which there is no evidence. For how long would you be willing to fight on?
That depends. That depends because Ukraine, well, but if it's a big idealistic mistake to think that Ukraine may prevail, which Russia is 16 times bigger than Ukraine. We have enormous resources, and we hasn't just started yet to act very seriously. And
you
Ukraine
haven't yet
is living
started to
at the
act
moment.
seriously, so this could get a lot worse?
I don't think so. That it is. We are just defending we are just defending now the lands which are under control, and we are assisting Russian people over there. We are rebuilding Donbass.
You say, though, there, it hasn't even got serious yet. Could this go on then for
I hope that
5
it will
years,
not go
10 years?
That depends on the efforts in escalation of war that is being undertaken by NATO countries, especially by the UK. Sooner or later, of course, this escalation may got a new dimension, which we do not need and we do not want.
What do you mean by that?
We can
Do you
make
mean
peace
nuclear,
tomorrow.
tactical
We can
weapons?
make peace tomorrow if Ukrainian side will be prepared to negotiate. But for the moment, there is no preconditions for that, I'm afraid.
What do you mean then by a new dimension?
New dimension, it is a long-range missiles that has been provided by United Kingdom. It is an escalation. Okay. Tanks provided, aircrafts provided. We're not afraid of aircrafts. In fact, we have downed by now 430 Ukrainian aircrafts, and provision of new, it is only will add to these numbers.
Just finally, Ambassador, it's remarkable speaking to you this afternoon that you are happy to repeat claims that have been disproven. You are happy to try to deflect questions. You are happy to mislead our audience about the truth. Maybe you're even lying to yourself about what is really going on. I just wonder, Russia has unleashed a
Laura,
terrible conflict that is hurting its own people as well as Ukrainians.
I think I have told you, if you will try to offend me once again, we will just stop this interview.
I'm not trying to offend you. I have a final question. What has happened in Ukraine for Russians and for Ukrainians has been terrible. How long is it before you look for a way out?
You're trying to tell me that I am misleading. I am not misleading you. I am just telling you our side of the story, which is never appearing in your newspapers, but it is appearing in other media. And if you are really and should be an unbiased journalist, this is in your CV and this job description, as I say, then you should learn both sides of the story.
This is not about both sides of the story. This is about truth.
Story always.
And I want you to give us your final answer. How long before you stop denying the reality of what is going on and look for a way out so that peace can come?
Okay, you can stop it tomorrow if you will stop, as Minister of Defense of Germany has said the day before yesterday, I guess, in the Parliament, that if we will stop supplying weapons to Ukraine, it will be stopped the day after tomorrow. That's it.
Is it funny?
That is funny, yes, of course. It's not very funny, but he's just said the truth. If supplies of weapons will be stopped, then it will all be finished the day after tomorrow. Please stop it. Okay, good.
People in Ukraine might rather wish that Russia would stop it.
If people in Ukraine will stop to support nationalists, if they will decide finally to change the course which their nationalistic government has taken, and if they will realize that the best way is to live in peace with the neighbors, and we should take care of each other, and we should also take into account interests of each other, and not the way Washington is living right now, either it is better to formulate my way or no way.
The Russian ambassador talking to me there. Let's go straight to you, Bill, because you've been following this for many, many years, and as a prominent activist who's been fighting against President Putin. It was surreal to talk to the Russian ambassador. I think some of our viewers might even find it grotesque to hear some of the things he was saying there. But what's your take on what is really happening inside the regime at the moment?
Well, they're failing. They're failing miserably. The corruption inside Russia has hollowed out their military. Their supposed strong force failed at every step. They've lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers. They've lost huge amounts of equipment. As he said, Ukraine is a small country compared to Russia, and they're being completely decimated by this small country. And it was very painful to watch that interview because everything he said was a lie. They're lying to themselves, they're lying to the West. And it's going to be difficult and painful for them when Ukraine finally launches their counteroffensive.
And what about, though, that internal dissent? I know you're close to the case of Vladimir Kara-Murza. We played the ambassador a question from his wife. What is going on with that internal repression of criticism?
So Russia used to be an authoritarian regime. Now it's turned into a totalitarian regime. It's like North Korea. You can't even hold up an empty sign with nothing on it on Red Square without being arrested and sent to jail. Vladimir Kara-Murza, my friend, his wife was there talking about his 25-year sentence. His 25-year sentence was for him criticizing Putin for human rights abuse. 25 years to going to jail for criticizing the government. It shows that there's just so much sensitivity that nobody can say a word inside Russia. Putin is so afraid of his own people. And so when people say that Putin is popular, he's not popular anymore. There's no way you can be popular when everybody has lost friends, relatives, etc. in the war. You can't be popular when you can't travel, you can't use Netflix, you can't use your credit card. And so now it's just a question of hardcore repression and how long they're able to do that repression before people say enough is enough. And we've seen this, like this Prigozhin guy. He's saying enough is, he's a monster himself, but he's saying enough is enough because they're not getting their weapons. Other people are saying enough is enough. There's now a group of people crossing the border.
There's a suggestion that there could be a threat to Putin. Is there a threat to Putin's ability to hang on in power right now?
I think there always has been a threat, which is why he becomes more and more strident, arresting more and more people. I think he started this war as a war of distraction. I think he started this war not because of NATO or not because of all this nonsense that the ambassador was saying in the interview. He started this war because he was afraid that the Russian people were going to rise up against him. A good war gets everybody turned against a foreign enemy.
Okay, and there is, of course, the impact in Russia and in Ukraine in all sorts of appalling ways. But Siobhan, for more than a year now, our economy is being hit in all sorts of ways because of the disruption from the conflict. For businesses at the moment, how tough is it? Have we got used in a way to saying, oh, well, it's difficult for business because of high inflation? What are your members telling you?
So remember, we were coming out of COVID when we started to see increasing prices of raw materials, difficulty getting people, supply issues, the war in Ukraine, eye-watering increases in energy costs, like for businesses 200, 300, 400%. Because remember, businesses...
400%.
Yeah, businesses don't have a price cap like consumers do. And a lot of small businesses just, buy energy like consumers do. So, huge on cost for business. It's been really, really hard for them to keep going. So it got better over the winter. Obviously, the energy support from government was hugely welcome. That's mainly gone. Businesses are adjusting. They do adjust, but it's been really hard work.
And inflation is still, so high, even though there are signs of it coming down. Core inflation is still up there. I must ask you, as you're here, it was reported that the Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey, said to you a while ago, oh, don't worry about inflation, it'll sort itself out. Is that true?
We did talk to the Governor about it early on. And what we said is, you're hearing it here first Governor. We're the canary in the mine. But remember, we were just coming out of COVID at the time. It had been really painful. And the Governor, you know, he had to wait and see for a little while.
Okay.
So
some of his critics say he maybe waited to see for a bit too long. But anyway, I'm sure that Bank of England would dispute that. Let's talk about the NHS then. So when we were talking to Steve Barclay, you were busy sending us in your emails. One of you wrote to say her elderly father had been stuck in an East Surrey hospital for 8 months waiting for a referral to a rehabilitation centre in the community. They said they're desperate for help. Somebody else has been told that they've got a 2-month wait for a consultant, so they'll be waiting in pain till then, and the situation is intolerable. Now, Vivek, while all of this is going on, it's so well documented. In a way, how can junior doctors who go into the profession to care for people walk out of the wards when members of the public and patients are suffering like this?
No doctor goes on strike happily. No doctor wants to inherently go on strike, but the alternative is inaction, and we can just see the trajectory of these worsening outcomes for patients get worse. So we have 7 million patients at the moment waiting for an elective appointment.
And it's going to get worse because you're going on strike.
Well, it's getting worse because we don't have enough staff to treat them. So that number is rising and would continue to rise unless we do something about it. Mr. Barclay talks about responding to NHS leaders about infrastructure around these hospitals, but I wonder why he's not responding to NHS leaders about staff. There's a number of NHS leaders who've documentedly said that underpaying workers will cause them to leave.
But I think quite a lot of our viewers might also hear that you started off by asking for 35%, and right now they'll think, that sounds crazy, no one's getting a 35% pay rise, and you've upped it since then. So surely you're going to have to budge on your demands in order to fix this situation for the people who are watching at home.
So we've been very consistent in what we're wanting, and that's to restore the pay that doctors have lost over the last 15 years. So we came to the government with a variety of proposals, trying to be flexible and creative to see what might work. The government suggested looking at deals which encompass a number of years, and they themselves suggested looking forwards into the future. Of course, that would account for further inflation and further pay erosion.
But will you budge from that demand?
To restore our pay. So what we're wanting to do is
to be clear with viewers,
pay.
what you want to do is restore it because of, you know, cuts over the years, or real terms cuts over the years. But the question now, in terms of trying to fix this, you heard the Health Secretary say you have to budge from your demand if there's a way through. Will you reduce your demands so that patients don't suffer the impact of strikes?
Well, that's exactly what we've been trying to do. We were trying to negotiate and come up with ways to do this, but it was clear that after the government offered us their 5%, despite us going back, being creative and coming back to them, they were the ones unwilling to budge. And that 5% amounts to a doctor who's now earning £14.09 an hour to earn £14.79 an hour. That's simply not going to be enough to keep them here, to be continuing to care for our population.
Being clear, are you still asking them for a 45% pay rise?
So that 45%, that 49, which Mr. Barclay talks about, was for future years. So that was not for this year. That's not what we talked about.
So what exactly are you asking for now, briefly?
We're to restore our pay, which is roughly 35% up to April 2022.
And you're sticking with that. OK, all three of you, thank you very much for now. We'll be back with you for a little bit of cheer at the end of the programme, because I promised you all something cheery at the end. But let's go back to the front pages, splashed with the disgrace of Philip Schofield, admitting he'd had an affair with a much younger male colleague and then lied about it, although he said he didn't break the law. But for ITV, a huge British brand and institution, there are big questions about who else knew what was going on and when. Nadine Dorries was the Culture Secretary, and she's now turning her hand to a bit of TV presenting as well as carrying on being an MP for now. I spoke to her a bit earlier, and I asked her about her own experience of being on the This Morning sofa with Philip Schofield.
It's never easy, you know, as you know, Laura, being interviewed as a politician by a presenter or a journalist. It's never an easy experience, but I just found him to be quite bullying in his attitude towards the co-host who was standing in for Holly Willoughby, and that made me feel more uncomfortable than answering the questions. When the camera was on me and I was talking, he started aggressively jabbing at the script with his hands so the pages were rattling, and the co-presenter looked terrified.
And now we know more about what was going on behind the scenes, and Philip Schofield has admitted he had lied to his bosses, to his family, to his viewers about what was going on behind the scenes. There are suggestions even that This Morning could be axed next. I mean, do you think that would be an appropriate response?
So, Laura, I wrote about this last week, and one of the points that I made was it will all come out in the wash. And it hasn't. The fact that Philip Schofield has made a rather grovelling apology to the Daily Mail in the form of an email, there seems to be this understanding that that's it now, everything will move on. And it's not the case, I'm afraid, because what it actually does is open up more questions as to what happened. We know that there were complaints lodged with ITV over a long period of time. What happened to those complaints? I think the editor of the programme, Martin Frizzell, has some questions to answer himself. And I'm afraid so does Holly Willoughby. And how did that young boy, so young, get a job at ITV? What were the processes that were involved? What was the safeguarding in place for someone who was so young at that age? What contact was first made? Who contacted who?
ITV, though, say that when there were rumours of this relationship, they did investigate, but there were categoric denials, and presumably they then hoped that everybody would move on. Do you think, I mean, you're having a go at TV presenting these days. I'm a TV presenter. Do you think that presenters, somebody as big and as well known as Philip Schofield, actually just have too much power in the industry?
So there's this thing, isn't there? There are men particularly, who have positions of authority or trust and power, kind of think they're above the law and above those standards that the rest of us are held by and held to. And I think there is absolutely an element of that which takes place.
You talk there about men in power, Nadine Dorries, obviously with a very different set of circumstances. There's been rather a lot of rumpus about your old friend Boris Johnson and some of his behaviour when he was still in power. Complaints about what happened during the lockdown have been referred again to police this week. And his allies, they were claiming it's some sort of stitch-up. Isn't the suggestion that it's stitch-up just spin and nonsense?
Oh, come on, Laura. It's anybody who thinks that just weeks before the Privileges Committee were about to announce their findings into the inquiry, that this just happened to be discovered and found and reported, I'm afraid it's for the birds.
It's quite something to say, aha, it must have happened. It's quite something else to actually have evidence of that and make claims that the government has been acting inappropriately.
The only people who are acting inappropriately and making false claims are those who have sent these diaries off to the police and off to the Privileges Committee just a few weeks before the Privileges Committee was about to report on its findings.
Just lastly, there is also a rumpus about the number of people that Boris Johnson wants to send to the House of Lords. Are you still expecting to get a peerage?
So I've never officially been told that is happening. Everybody else...
Not officially.
But the only thing I've seen is a leak to a newspaper, so I don't expect anything in this life, Laura. I'll just take whatever comes my way.
OK, Nadine Dorries, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. Nadine Dorries there. Now, as we've been discussing this morning, the NHS is never far from the top of voters' lists, so it's never very far from politicians' lips. We spoke to the Health Secretary a few minutes ago, Steve Barclay, and Labour's Jonathan Ashworth is here. Used to be the Shadow Health Secretary, is now the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. Good morning.
Good morning.
One thing's a bit striking in the last 7 days. This time last week, Wes Streeting, your colleague at Health for Labour, was talking about patient choice. And then the Conservatives have been talking about patient choice this week. Actually, your plans for the NHS are rather similar to the Conservatives, aren't they?
Well, I wish the Conservatives were picking up the plans that Keir Starmer and my friend and colleague Wes Streeting have outlined, because one of the big issues in the NHS, one of the reasons why we've got 7 million people on a waiting list, many people waiting beyond a year for treatment, and now 2.5 million people out of work for reasons of sickness. We've lost 500 million days to sickness since 2019, so people are too sick to work. One of the reasons why people are waiting so long for treatment is because we simply don't have enough staff in the National Health Service, which is why Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting have outlined a really detailed plan to recruit the nurses, the midwives, the paramedics, the doctors that we need in our NHS now. And I just wish that Steve Barclay would adopt it. Actually, Jeremy Hunt supported the plan when Wes Streeting announced it, and now he appears to be blocking it as far as we can
But
tell.
there are also some striking similarities, and both parties are presenting patient choice as a big part of the solution here. And I want to play Spot the Difference with you this morning, Jonathan Ashworth. We can show you two different quotes, I think, on the screen from this week.
Right.
Give patients choice over where they get their treatment from. And then the other on the other side, patients should be able to visit nearby hospitals when faster treatment is available. Patients should be able to choose where they go. Now, one of them was said by Keir Starmer, one of them was said by Rishi Sunak. Can you tell us what the difference is?
I think the latter one was said by Keir, but perhaps you're going to...
I am going to reveal it, and you actually got it right, so no blushes for you. We've got Rishi Sunak said that, and Keir Starmer is there. But the point
But I'm pleased that Rishi Sunak is copying Keir, and that Keir, again, is leading the way.
So they are very similar plans. And this is absolutely the point. For lots of people in your party, actually, they say, well, Labour's offering patient choice and more uses of the private sector. That's basically what the Tories are doing. What do you say to them?
No, it's not remotely what the Conservatives are doing. We've got a plan to drive down waiting lists, right? People are waiting too long for treatment under the Conservatives. And if somebody can get treatment somewhere else more swiftly, then they should be able to do that. But the big difference between us and the Conservatives is we have a detailed plan to recruit the doctors, the nurses, the midwives, and so on for our National Health Service. A second big difference is, and this is where it comes to the brief that I now lead on for the Labour Party, is that I want to bring together what we're doing in the job centre and the benefit system alongside what we're doing in many mental health services, addiction services, because when we know that so many people are out of work for reasons of mental health conditions or an addiction, then there are ways in which services can work together to get people back to work.
And we've talked before to you about your plans to get people back to work, but like a lot of employers right now, the NHS is very dependent on foreign labour. And your party's position might be a bit confusing for viewers in the last few days, so maybe you can help clear things up. Because your party chair, Annalise Dodds, said under your plan, immigration could go up in the short term. But Keir Starmer keeps saying he wants immigration to go down. So who's right?
No, we want immigration to come down. That is our plan. You've seen very detailed proposals this week from Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper on how we want to reform the system. We don't want a system where firms can recruit and undercut workers by 20%.
But do you acknowledge, as Annalise Dodds suggested, your colleague in the Shadow Cabinet, she said immigration might go up in the short term if skills are needed?
No, that's incorrect. What we want to do is bring immigration down. Now, the immigration system...
So she was wrong to say that in the short term it might go up.
I didn't see her interview, to be fair. But
well, I can tell you what she said. She said under your plan, immigration numbers could go up in the short term.
No. That is not. Our plan is to bring migration down. In many ways, the immigration system, and it should be fair and rule-based and based on points, is a reflection of the health of the labour market. And the reason why immigration is at such high levels, 600,000 under the Conservatives, even though they promised to bring it right down, the reason for that is because we're not investing in reskilling and upskilling workers. We're not investing and reforming our welfare and job centre system to get people back into work. And that's what we will do. We'll fix the red tape and the bureaucracy in the apprenticeship levy. We'll fix and reform job centres and the welfare system to encourage people to move into work.
Those things will take time. They may be laudable aims. The Conservatives would disagree with your plans, but they may be laudable aims for the Labour Party. But a lot of people on the left would like you to make a positive case for immigration and not see, as we've seen this morning in the Sun newspaper, Keir Starmer on one side of the paper saying that immigration should go down, and Suella Braverman, the Tory Home Secretary, saying on the other side immigration should go down.
But you say they'll take time. We've got 1.3 million people unemployed. We've got 700,000 young people not in work, not in education or training. We've got hundreds of thousands of people who are sick or older workers over 50 who say if they were given support, they would try work. And you know what? Only 1 in 10 sick or disabled people out of work or older workers out of work get any support from the system. That is ridiculous. We have to reform that. And ministers cannot even tell you how many unemployed people claiming universal credit are accessing any training. They don't have any figures on that. That is hopeless. You can reform this system now to help people move into work.
OK. Lastly, I want to ask you about the government's proposals, such as they are, to get the supermarkets to cap prices. Now, last time you were here, we talked about food prices, and you said you'd like to improve supply chains and this, that and the other. But now the Conservatives appear to be trying to freeze prices. They're actually to the left of you, aren't they?
I mean, it is extraordinary. I mean, Rishi Sunak is now like a sort of latter-day Edward Heath with price controls. But look, we've got an inflation problem, and the reason we've got such an inflation problem in this country is because of 13 years of failure where we've not invested in sustainable energy, we cut our gas storage, and we're not improving the labour supply. We could take measures now to get inflation under control and to grow our economy. But instead you've got Jeremy Hunt saying, oh, we might need to go into a recession, as if, you know, worklessness, unemployment, people losing their homes is a price worth paying.
Okay.
Government could take action now to tame inflation.
OK, Jonathan Ashworth, great to have you in the studio as always. Thank you very much indeed. Now, it is nearly 10 o'clock, believe it or not, and let's remind ourselves we started this morning asking if either of the two main parties were really getting to grips with what's going on in the NHS. We've just heard Labour's answer, and earlier I asked the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, about the government's promise to build 40 so-called new hospitals. Here's what he said.
Some of the schemes include, for example, a hospital being gutted and fully refurbished. If I look at Charing Cross, for example, that's exactly what we'll be doing, and we'll be starting work to decant some of the facilities and then refurbish. So there's a range of things within the scheme.
So there's a range of things.
That was
it's
a debate
not
that was
40
had.
new hospitals.
That was a debate that was had in 2020.
A range of things. Well, we're going to talk about something fun in just a second, but Vivek, for our viewers, what are the chances, do you think, of you and the government being able to sort out your dispute? If you had to give us, I don't know, marks out of 10.
Well, we're trying all we can, and we're eager and ready to get back to the negotiating table, but it's the government who are refusing to meet us there.
You're not budging on your demand, though.
We have budged. We're very happy to explore ways to fully restore our doctors' pay, and we've come up with a variety of proposals to do that. But when the government don't budge from an offer which would reflect another real terms pay cut and only widen the gap that doctors have between the rest of the workers in the economy, it's no surprise that that's not going to be acceptable to our members. OK,
well, it doesn't sound like we managed to find peace and harmony between you and the government here in the studio this morning. But let's show you something joyous. Here are pictures of what happened in Luton last night. I hope we can show you them now. Jubilation, as just in case you missed it, Luton are being promoted to the Premiership after winning 6-5 on penalties. The joy of supporting small football teams. Just extraordinary pictures there. Siobhan, were you watching that last night?
I was actually in Luton last month with our Bedfordshire Chamber meeting a load of businesses, so I know they're going to be very pleased today.
It's funny, isn't it? If you think about something that happens in a town like Luton or it'll be like Wrexham we've seen in the last few months, I mean, how much can that kind of thing help a small part, you know, a small town around the country, do you think?
It's great inward investment, isn't it, Laura? It's global Britain at its best.
Vivek, what did you make of seeing that? I think you're from Leicester, aren't you?
I
am,
had
a similar kind of story not so long ago.
A very real underdog story a couple of years ago where they went promoted from the Championship, went on to win the Premier League, and it really brought jubilation to the city. There were street parties, it was great. It was a great time to be there. And
Bill's an American, but you've lived in the UK for a long time. Do you look at that and feel bemused, or are you enjoying it along with everybody else?
I love when the little guy, you know, wins big, and that's the great thing about football here is that in America you have a National Football League, and nobody gets relegated or promoted. And here you can have all these, like, you know, these little success stories, and all of a sudden some, you know, from nowhere, you know, becomes somebody, and that's a nice. It's nice to see the social mobility of in you know, America is supposed to be the place of social mobility, but here you have social mobility in football anyways.
You can see it through sport. And have you become a football fan with all your years living in London?
How can you not?
Okay, well, all three of you, thank you so much for joining us this morning and giving us your insights on such a wide range of things. But as we were saying, it's all connected somehow. What's happening in Ukraine affects the economy and inflation and then pay demands. So it's been great to hear you stitch it all together for us. Thank you so much. Wasn't it nice to see those pictures of some good cheer as we say goodbye to you for another week? There's not always that much good news around, whether we're thinking about Ukraine or when it comes to the prospect of sorting out strikes in the NHS. As Vivek from the Junior Doctors Committee was just saying, they seem resolved to keep at it, keep with their demands to the government. And the Nurses Union, of course, is still locked in dispute too, although some of the unions have agreed to the government's pay deal. All the while, the Conservatives and the Labour Party are vying to persuade you they're the ones with a proper plan for the health service's future. But I've said it before, and I'm afraid I will say it again, that until we see and understand more of what our political parties would do about caring for the elderly and vulnerable with social care, there will still be question marks about what they can really achieve. No fear, we will keep trying to fill in the blanks every single Sunday. As ever, you can catch up with anything you missed today on the iPlayer, and I will look forward to seeing you here, same time, next week. Goodbye.